There's a moment that feels slightly off. Not painful, just heavy, like standing in a room where the air has been used up by other people. You're still breathing, but slower, more carefully. It often happens when nothing obvious is wrong. A quiet afternoon, a familiar voice, a routine exchange. And yet something tightens, not in the chest exactly, somewhere deeper, a place that doesn't have words. You notice it more as time passes, not when you were younger. Back then, it was easier to move past it, to stay busy, to stay agreeable, to stay useful. Now it lingers, not louder, just clear. People assume strength shows early, that confidence arrives first, that power announces itself, but that's not the part most people notice. What shows early is sensitivity, not as a gift, as exposure. You feel things before you understand them. You register tone before meaning. You absorb what others release without realizing it. When you're young, this doesn't look like power. It looks like hesitation, like overthinking, like being too much or not enough, depending on who's watching. You learn quickly what keeps things smooth, what keeps people calm, what keeps tension from rising. So you adapt without deciding to. You listen longer than necessary. You soften your reactions. You carry emotions that weren't handed to you directly. No one calls this strength. They call it being easy, or quiet, or sensitive in a way that sounds like a warning. And something subtle happens. You start measuring yourself by how little space you take, but there's something quieter happening underneath. All that noticing doesn't disappear, it collects. Every unspoken feeling you sensed, every shift in mood you adjusted for, every time you felt responsible for the emotional temperature of a room, it settles somewhere, not neatly, but patiently. Years pass like this. Life moves, roles change, expectations rearrange themselves, and the same sensitivity that once felt like a liability begins to feel heavier. Not sharper, heavier. You tire faster, crowds drain more than they used to, conversations feel louder even when voices are low. People think this means you're becoming fragile, less tolerant, less flexible, but that's not it. There's a shift happening, slow, almost invisible. You start noticing when something doesn't belong to you, an emotion that arrives suddenly, a pressure that doesn't match the moment. At first, you still carry it out of habit, out of loyalty to who you've always been. But it costs more now, and that cost becomes impossible to ignore. This is where it starts to change. Not dramatically, not with declarations, just with small refusals. You don't engage as quickly, you don't explain as much, you don't rush to soothe discomfort that isn't yours. People feel this before they understand it. They sense a difference, a pause where there used to be immediate response. Some misread it as distance, others as confidence, but inside it feels like weight redistributing itself. You're not becoming harder, you're becoming more precise. The early years were about absorption, taking everything in, learning the shape of emotional undercurrents, mapping reactions. Studying silence. You didn't know you were studying. You thought you were surviving, and now those patterns start arranging themselves into something usable. Still, the power isn't obvious yet because it doesn't push outward. It settles inward. You begin to trust what you sense without needing proof, not impulsively, quietly. You notice when someone's words and energy don't align. You notice when a situation will cost more than it gives, and you don't argue with that knowing anymore. This confuses people because they remember when you were more accommodating, more available, more willing to stretch yourself thin. They don't see the internal fatigue that led here. There's a common belief that sensitivity weakens with age, that people grow numb, detached, but that's not what's happening here. The sensitivity remains. It just stops scattering itself everywhere. Halfway through life, something becomes clear without being announced. All those years of emotional awareness weren't meant to make you pliable. They were meant to refine perception. This is the realization that arrives quietly, almost reluctantly. You were never meant to manage everyone else's emotional state. You were meant to understand it. Understanding and caring are not the same thing. Earlier in life, they blur together because you don't yet know the difference. Later, the difference becomes unmistakable. You can sense pain without stepping into it. You can witness conflict without dissolving into it. You can feel deeply without losing your center. That's the power people don't see coming, not dominance, not control. Clarity. You stop mistaking intensity for truth. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. Your nervous system has seen enough patterns to recognize what repeats. And because you feel things early, you now see outcomes early too. This changes how you move. You speak less, but with weight. You choose environments more carefully. You protect your attention without apology, not because you're closed, but because you're selective. There's a calm authority that comes from knowing what drains you and what doesn't, from recognizing when empathy turns into erosion. This awareness doesn't shout. It doesn't try to convince. It simply stands. People who once overlooked you start feeling steadied around you. They don't always know why. Your presence doesn't spike emotion. It regulates it. That's not learned behavior. It's accumulated understanding. The personality that once bent to accommodate now holds shape, not rigid, defined. And this definition took time. It required disappointment, misplaced loyalty, emotional overextension. It required being misunderstood long enough to stop explaining yourself. This kind of power can arrive early. It needs contrast. It needs exhaustion. It needs discernment carved slowly from experience. Later in life, empathy stops being something that leaks. It becomes something that flows deliberately. You don't disappear into rooms anymore. You anchor them, and still you remain quiet about it. There's no need to announce what you've become. Those who feel it will adjust. Those who don't were never meant to stay close. The strength here isn't in how much you feel. It's in how little you abandon yourself while feeling it. Toward the end, things soften. Not because the world got easier, but because you're no longer fighting your own nature. You let perception be perception without turning it into obligation. That's when the personality settles into its real weight. Not impressive, not performative, just steady, just present, and somehow, finally enough,